Okay, so I think that was it. So I'm going to now get into the panel and introduce our panel moderator, Annie. Annie is the Senior Business Analyst at Fraser Health Authority and a graduate of the Master of Data Science program at UBC. Her work provides healthcare providers with analytical insights needed to make data-informed decisions. She creates efficiencies within the organization by automating processes using Python and SQL. Prior to this, Annie specialized in market research and analytics within the media and advertising industry across the US and Canada. She transitioned from a creative role designing campaigns and marketing collateral to analytics while working in the marketing department of an advertising firm in New York City. I'll now pass the virtual mic over to Annie to introduce the rest of the panel.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Natasha. And I know we're running a bit behind, but I'm going to try to end the first part of our panel at 9:45. So let's get right into it. We have a really exciting panel today. Everyone comes from such diverse backgrounds and does very different things in data science. And we all know data science is huge. It can go from data visualization to natural language processing to statistical analysis, you name it, we've got it. So for our panel introduction, I'm going to ask each panelist to provide a brief summary of your background and then also tell us, what does data science look like to you in your current role? So Amir, let's start with you.
How you doing, everybody? My name's Emer Nolan, and I'm a senior data scientist at OnBounce. I actually started out in electronic engineering. I went into biomedical engineering and then kind of gradually worked my way away from biomedical engineering and into just pure data science. So in OnBounce, I head up a prototyping machine learning team, and we basically spin up quick machine learning prototypes that we show to customers and then get their feedback to see what sort of value it can bring them. Most of the time they're in natural language processing, but it's not really reserved to just that as well.
Perfect, thank you very much. Helen.
Hi, I'm Helen Wall, and I work mostly in the visualization side. I do a lot of work with Power BI and AWS, and then going back into SQL, Python, R, a lot of the data science languages. And I started as an actuary at a life insurance company I live in Texas, and then I transitioned into data science kind of gradually.
Thank you. Jess?
Hi, I'm Jess. So I work as a data scientist on the people analytics team at Shopify. I started at Shopify about 6 years ago on the recruitment team, and I had been doing some quantitative basic reporting off the side of my desk. And long story short, made a transition over to the people analytics team eventually. And what data science looks like in my role can really vary from day to day. We own our whole tech stack because a lot of the information is sensitive about employees. So it might be, building a job to pull in a new data source. It might be building out a dashboard. It could be some sort of statistical causal inference analysis to understand the effect of some sort of action on attrition or performance. So it really varies from day to day, and it's very broad, but that's me.
Thank you. And Nikki?
Hello, everyone. My name is Nikki. I work as a language engineer at Amazon. My background, my bachelor's is in Faculty of Medicine, studying pathology, and I studied my master's in Master of Data Science in computational linguistics. And what I do right now is mostly natural language understanding to help Alexa have a better language modeling and hopefully a better product for the customers.
Thank you so much. So as you guys have heard, there are very different backgrounds. We've got engineering, we've got actuarial sciences, we've got HR, and then also medicine. So when you guys were going into your first data science or data analytics position, what were some of the biggest misconceptions people had of you? And how did you overcome those when you're interviewing for these positions? I'm going to switch it up and start with Helen.
So that's actually, it's interesting bringing back sort of how to define the data science role. So I'm a LinkedIn learning instructor, so I create content mostly on Power BI for the library. And one of the kind of ways that I got into that was the library itself is broken into like a business, creative, and then technology section. And within the technology section, there's a data science umbrella, right? And there's also some overlap with other areas. And so I think, if you're looking to get into the area, having a strong Excel background is really helpful. Spending time learning SQL, that can help, jump into that area, because a lot of it is, very specific to a business, and, learning how to work with the data and feel comfortable with it. I think that's a jump into it. I don't know if I necessarily had to kind of explain what I did necessarily. I think it was more like, okay, this is the tool and this falls under this data science umbrella. And Power BI is a big development area for Microsoft. So they're always bringing, there's always new updates coming out too. So I'm always learning something new as well.
Great. So it sounds like there weren't so much misconceptions about your skill set, but you wanted to make sure that you were learning the right tools to be able to do the work without necessarily coming from a traditional data science background.
Yeah, and actuarial science uses quite a bit of data. Because a lot of, for like life insurance companies, a lot of it is done, it's called seriatim. And I've never seen the word used. It's like a policy level detail. And so some of these businesses had, millions of policies. Some of them had more, some of them had, a huge volume of policies. And so I'd worked with some of the data and used SAS a bit and SAP. And I think that my approach was just, if learning this tool, whatever it is going to be helpful for me to gain a better understanding what's going on, then that was something that was worth, like, okay, let me learn more about that. But it also took me a long time to figure out that, how to learn these new skills in the office. I know a lot of people come from accounting backgrounds. And I worked in a group that reported, it was actuarial valuation. It reported to, they worked very closely with financial reporting. And that was, one of the areas, like, okay, there are these tools and technology, right? And they differ at every company, and every company it looks slightly different than maybe what you've seen before, but having that adaptability and ability to change, I think is really important.
Right, absolutely. And Nikki, you came from medical sciences, really. So going into data science, what were some of the misconceptions that people had of you when you were trying to interview for these positions?
Yeah, definitely for me was like the lack of experience. So beforehand, I did not have any experience in this field. I never worked in an industry before. So for me to overcome this misconception was to learn and be curious a lot, and show that in my resume by a lot of personal projects that I participated during my master's alone on my own. So I think it's really important to showcase that even if you are lacking experience, you are willing to learn, and you are willing to take the extra mile to build something out of nothing when there's no experience around, for you to kind of like take over. So I think, yeah, a lot of personal projects, a lot of studying on my own helped a lot.
Amazing. And Amir, coming from an engineering background, were there any misconceptions people had of you to be able to do the kind of work you do now?
I think there definitely was, especially coming from biomedical engineering. I think they just assumed that my career was meant to be making pacemakers and that sort of thing, and it wasn't really related to data science. But there is quite a lot of data science in biomedical engineering, and that's actually the part that I used to focus on, which was really heavy mathematical models using biodata, which is actually quite difficult data to wrangle. If you worked in that industry, you definitely would know that. So when I went into those interviews and they were looking at my CV a bit confused, I was like, well, you know, it's not data science, but I've worked with data for 2 years and I've built models on data. So it's called a different name, but it's really the same work. And you just had to lean really heavily on that and explain how that transfers over into data science in a really correct way.
Love that answer. And Jess, last but not least, I mean, you transitioned within the walls of Shopify. So when you were making that transition, did you have to justify your ability to take on this kind of role? Were there any misconceptions that you had in the company?
Yeah, I got really lucky in that I don't feel as though I was misconceived in any way. I had really good relationships with the team I joined before I joined them. And they all knew that like I was coming from a non-technical background. I think it was a bit lower risk because it was supposed to be a temporary sort of secondment position, sort of a quid pro quo. They were ingesting all this new recruitment data from our applicant tracking system, and they had no idea of all the weird ways we had used this tool and how they should model it. And I was very curious about Python and SQL and data science, and was doing some basic stuff off the side of my desk, and using Excel a lot, and just hitting a lot of walls and being frustrated, feeling like there was some tool out there that could make my job easier. And so, I just, I had the opportunity to just pop my head in the room where they worked, and I would do that pretty casually and frequently. And they sort of welcomed me with open arms. I feel like the one thing that led to a lack of misconception is that they really value subject matter expertise. At least I feel like in the field of data science at Shopify, but especially within people analytics, I never felt like because I had not been a hacker my whole life that my experience wasn't valuable. They really took the time to hear me out and really understand what I brought to the table, and saw things that aren't as technical as valuable as well, like communication and writing and all these other things that I think are part of the field of data science if you want to be effective in it, but don't necessarily show up in all of the blog posts of what you need to learn to be a great data scientist.
And speaking of what you need to learn to be a great data scientist, I did notice when I was looking up everyone's profiles that Emir and Nikki, you guys, you went back to school. So Emir, you were already working as a data mining analyst at the University of Queensland, and that was back in 2013. And then you went back to school for a Master of Science in Bioengineering. And Nikki, you were already working as an assistant data scientist at the UBC Emerging Media Lab, and yet you went back to school to get a Master of Data Science at UBC. So do the two of you feel that graduate degrees were necessary for your transition into your current roles? Nikki, how about we start with you?
Yeah, for me, I felt it was necessary because first of all, my background was not in this industry, and I feel like I do not have enough experience to go ahead and just apply for jobs, and based on few lines on my resume showcase that, okay, I have this ability, take me. So I felt like Master of Data Science at UBC was a kind of great stepping stone for me to be able to it was like a gateway for me to be able to get an interview, first of all, and then after the interview, be able to showcase, okay, I have this master's. It was very intense. I was able to graduate with a good grade. So I think it was a good approval for me to be able to showcase during my interviews.
Thank you. And Amir?
That was actually a summer research program, that position. So it wasn't actually a full-time position, but it was my first introduction to machine learning in general. And it's definitely where I got that spark of curiosity for the entire topic. I actually did the master's because I really wanted to do that master's. And actually in 2014 in Europe, there was no machine learning master's. It didn't exist. And that's how fast this sort of topic is, because that was the closest I could possibly find to machine learning was a master's in bioengineering. But I did it because I really wanted to do it. But I don't think if you were very technical and you come from an engineering background, I don't think you need to do a graduate program. You would need a very good GitHub account where you have a lot of personal projects, like Nikki said, and a lot of curiosity. But it was a personal choice for me that I just really wanted to learn more about it.
Thank you. And Helen, you actually already have a graduate degree as well, but it was in financial management. And Jess, you joined the recruitment team with a bachelor's in marketing. So both of you learned programming either at your desk or off the side of your desk. So when you were trying to get into a more data science space, was there like a really big challenge that you needed to overcome? Or was there any pivotal moment where you felt, oh yeah, now I finally crossed the border into that space? Helen?
I think it was a lot of it is gradual. I'm sure that a lot of the other panelists, could speak to that too. It's not like I kind of woke up one morning and all of a sudden I was doing something completely different. One thing that, I think it took me a long time to learn this. I mentioned with like, when I started work as an actuary was that, I didn't kind of embrace the training, going in and saying, okay, I'm going to learn a new system. I should learn SAP or learn all about this, just because, so actuarial science had exams, and after a while I realized it really wasn't something that I was interested in doing for the long run. I think that doing jobs that you don't you don't necessarily want to continue on, you can still learn a lot from them. I think that it's really valuable to work with people that are helpful. I've worked with some amazing people that, I've learned a lot from, whether it's better communication skills or just, learning technology, and often like kind of looking at the way that they did things and then trying to see if you could, if I could replicate it myself. And then, you kind of take the training wheels off and you're able to kind of go on your own. One thing that I think is really key, and like even so I record, so I'm developing a course for the LinkedIn Learning Library right now. And one of the things is, if you're not going to necessarily know how to do everything before you start, and so having this approach of like, if I don't know this, or I'm not quite sure how to connect all the dots, I will find out, that even if I don't know this, I will figure out a way to find out how to do it. And another thing that I've seen recently that I think really wraps it up well is, everyone wants to be a data science, but I think you really have to want to do data science in order to really embrace the career, because doing is harder than being. And so you have to embrace the process, even if it's hard or you get stuck, just figure out how to break it down into pieces. And the other thing is, I would almost think of it like, if you're looking at getting into the field, so you start with something that right? Start with Excel, build out your SQL skills, and then sort of almost expand your yard. Like, don't kind of go and try and land somewhere new and start all over again. Just think about like, what do I know that can help me get to the next step, and then just expanding your skills from there, because it's not going to be the same as other people's, but you can look at it like, okay, I know this, how can I grow what I know and expand my area of expertise and knowledge.
Absolutely. And Jess, you did actually do just that. Like, you actually expanded on the things that you already knew, and you popped your head in to ask questions every now and then. So was there a point where your training wheels came off?
Yeah. So how I ended up on the people analytics team was that I was looking to go back to school, because I think I had a misconception that like that was the only way for me to kind of like inject myself into this new industry. Like, I would have to retrain and go back to school. And I found this program in Toronto that I wanted to do, and my manager was super supportive, but she doesn't know Python or SQL or anything of the kind. So she showed it to one of the data science managers, and he said, sometimes these kinds of boot camps can be hit or miss. Why don't you just join our team? And so it was just kind of an immediate like, and now you're on this data science team. And there were many challenges. I had so many great mentors though. They had the attitude of baptism by fire. So like, first day, I had like started learning a lot on my own in advance, mostly SQL, because I had the frame of reference, like Helen said, of Excel, and like, you know, I was pretty good at Excel, so SQL kind of made sense to me, just in terms of like from a logical perspective of what you were trying to do, just like change the shape of a data frame. But Python was like kind of out there. Like I literally had no technical background, and it felt like they were kind of like starting in the middle of the book, and I was at the beginning, like chapter 0. So there were like a lot of challenges, but I am glad they threw me into the deep end a lot. I think as soon as I stopped being scared to just try things without knowing kind of like the exact answer and what I would do at each step of the way to solve a problem, and just be like, okay, let's break it down. I need to solve this thing first, and here's how I'll do it. Like Helen said, again, like just knowing that you'll be able to like look up the answer or figure it out or ask someone. I think pairing helped a lot too, seeing all these people I respected who were so brilliant at their work, just being like, Stack Overflow, let me look this up. So I think, yeah, just like exposing myself to as many resources as possible, like spending a lot of my own time doing it. I really desperately wanted there to be a moment where I'm like, I've done it. This is it. This was the turning point. But it was very gradual. I think there were a few times where I looked back in my notes to be like, here's how to make a PR, and being like, wow, I can't believe I had to write that down at one point in time. So yeah, I think it does happen gradually. You have to really want it though. Like I was dedicating my evenings and weekends, like every spare moment I had, to learning this craft. And you have to have like some amount of investment from your mentors to help you out. I think like that, at least for me, was really helpful starting from nothing. But yeah, definitely investing in yourself as much as anyone around you is investing in you.
And I love that you brought up mentors, which we are going to get back to in the next time we go back to this panel. But before we break, because we only got a few minutes left here, I do want to ask a quick question to Nikki, Amir, and Helen about how you found out about your job. Because I mean, Jess was really lucky. She had the job sort of like, it's here. We could just like put her there. But for the rest of you guys, like, what resources did you look at to actually find your first position? Let's start with Nikki.
Yeah, for me, it was like every resources from LinkedIn to any job website, even like Googling like data science jobs in Vancouver. And especially for me, it was like after I graduated, it was during pandemic. So I was really lucky that I started earlier during my program to look for jobs, and I came upon this this same exact position, but not this this job, but like same exact position in my team during November when I was still in the middle of my master's, and I applied for it, got through the first round, got through the second round, and they called me and they're like, "Oh, we filled the position. Sorry about that. We got someone else." So it was really discouraging at the time, but I kept on looking for open opportunities again in Amazon. And the moment it opened up, like another position opened up in the team, I called the basically emailed the recruiter. I was like, hey, I interviewed 2 rounds. You guys got another one. I really want to showcase my abilities. I know I fit this job. And it was just like a lot of being persistent for me. I know Excel sheets of which jobs I applied, what is the stages that I am in with them. So I feel like it's really important to plan and organize. Don't think you're gonna stumble upon a job and they're gonna give it to you. It's not like that. I think it's being persistent is a key, and just staying active, looking for jobs every day. And I'm not saying just every day, I mean every day, for every opportunity to open up, apply. And I feel like one other thing that was really teachable for me, it was that you don't have to have all the requirements of the jobs that you're applying to. Don't think you have to tick every box. Even I would say 50 to 70% of the requirements, if you have it, go for it. A lot of things you learn during your job, and you're not necessarily need to know them beforehand. So that was one thing I learned as well, because beforehand I thought, oh, I have to tick every box before I apply for this job. That's not true. So yeah, being persistent and don't underestimate yourself.
Awesome. Persistence, confidence, organization, using every resource possible. Emer, did you do the same thing when you first applied to your position?
100%. Actually, it's nearly the same story. I started out just when I finished college in a biomedical engineering position, and I decided when I wanted to go more into data science that the first thing I wanted to do was really get to grips with software, because I hadn't really worked with software very much, or coding or anything like that. So I took a position in a company that had both a software team, where I got a position as a backend engineer, but it also had a data science team. And I kind of made sure it did, because I basically spent the year and a half while learning software doing reconnaissance on the data science team beside me for the whole year, and learning what they were doing, and slightly eavesdropping on what sort of models they were building, and Googling them at the same time. And that went on for about a year and a half. And then when a position came up on that team, I was pretty persistent, and I interviewed, and I said, look, I might know it, but I will definitely learn it, because I've been learning software for a year when I have no software degree. So, you know, I might know it now, but I'll get there. So yeah, there's definitely a lesson of being very persistent, even if you don't have it now. Having the confidence to know that you will learn it at some stage by any means possible is probably key.
That is such a smart idea. And Helen, I'm actually going to switch it up on you. Sorry. Instead of asking the same question, because you already work at LinkedIn, I'm sure a lot of people are curious. Is there any sort of trick or suggestion that might help people stand out on LinkedIn?
So it's interesting. I'm effectively a LinkedIn consultant. It's the author. So I didn't know much about the publishing world before I got into this. And so it's very interesting, because so LinkedIn Learning was lynda.com, and it was started by Linda Weinman, and she was a self-taught graphic designer, and quite incredible woman. And what I think I went into with is, what value can I bring to the library? What are areas that I can add my knowledge to and expand on the existing library, because there's always something new to learn. And so, you know, going in with a proposition about what you can bring to you know, the field, or bring to the group, or bring to the content, you know, kind of swimming out to go get it, rather than necessarily saying, well, let's just see what's out there, because, you know, it's a moving target. And, you know, with Power BI, I would say if it's updated every month, it's, you know, it is a moving target, because every time, you know, by the time, you know, I record a course, and then you know, it gets edited, right, it's going to look slightly different, because there's been another monthly release. And so really, you know, kind of embracing that. And I would say the other thing is that I've seen a few studies that said that the number one indicator for success in the tech world is curiosity. And so, you know, if you're curious about doing things, and you're always thinking about ways to, you know, explain things and to learn about things, that I think that's really, really valuable. You know, it's what I talked about with the value of doing something rather than being something, because, you know, there's a lot of work that goes on that, you know, you can talk about these models, and everyone else can speak to this too, is that it didn't start that way. You know, there's a lot of dead ends and frustrations. And sometimes you think, well, this isn't, you know, I've put something together, and maybe, you know, something's not quite right. And so there's so much work that goes on beneath the surface, really like embracing that process, because like course development is a huge endeavor. But, you know, if you like what you do, and you know, you love what you do, and you embrace it, that's, you know, that's going to help you get through, you know, become that what you want to be, right, by doing it.
So for you, it's you're looking at curiosity. For Nikki and Amir, you're looking at persistence and organization. And there are all these things that get you to the point where you are today. I was fully expecting you, Helen, by the way, to do a plug for LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, so I'm recording a course actually on these built-in AI and machine learning capabilities, and I'm doing that next week. But I have other courses in the library on Power BI, and actually quite a few different areas, and then also AWS QuickSight. And so there's a lot to learn, and this, you know, the courses of course don't even cover everything, you know, it's huge. So
So
yeah, check out the courses if you're interested in learning more, and you can leave a question in the Q&A box, and I answer those.
So if anyone from LinkedIn is here or watching the recording, you're welcome. And with that, I will pass it back to Natasha for our Q&A.
Okay, thanks, Annie, and to our panelists. I'm just going to quickly again share my screen with the code and the link to our Menti platform to ask any questions. And I've also posted it in the chat a few questions ago. So just opening it up. So, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and start first with the highest upvoted question. So, and hopefully everyone can see my screen. How do I translate my accomplishments from another field into a resume that is attractive for a company hiring for a data scientist position? And I think there's a few questions kind of in this theme, like how do I have a few years of experience in another field. How can I make that beneficial to my data scientist application instead of just like leaving it off the resume? And does anyone want to jump in?
I can take over that
Okay,
question. So for me, like I had a lot of these kind of experiences on my resume that was not related to data science. So what I did, I took aspects that were remotely related to data science and tried to highlight them. For example, if I worked in a lab before, that I did some data analysis as well as some research that was mostly medical related, and like I would say 90% of that experience was in field of medical, I would take that 10% that I did data analysis in it and try to expand on that, and try to show exactly how I was curious and how I pushed more for that 10%, although it was not in my field that I was doing research on.
thanks.
So I would also say that don't think of data science necessarily as like a technology role. Think of it as a business role that applies technology. So if you look at the work you've done in the past, look at, share, you saved your company this much in cost savings, you improved this process. And if you can assign like a number to, even if it's like a rough, like, ballpark estimate, that you're showing that you as an individual are, you can bring value to your business. Because a lot of it is a communication, right? Data science, like we're talking about languages, and at the end of the day, that the communication is really important. And so just communicating what value you've brought to the business in your resume, and showing that you're eager to fill in the gaps, the technology, because, that business is a huge part of the role, even though that's not necessarily something that's, kind of what you need to know, but, bringing domain knowledge.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. We can go on to the next one.
Oh no, oh yeah, go ahead, Jess.
Okay. Yeah, coming from the perspective of a former recruiter to now a person who has a lot on her resume that isn't necessarily data science, I think I definitely, like Helen said, like highlight the impact of the things that I did, like what business impact did this thing have? And yeah, and if you can get kind of concrete and like quantitative about like what effect those things had, it definitely, I think, catches a recruiter's eye. I think, yeah, so in terms of my experience in the marketing roles and recruitment roles that I've had in the past, I've always kind of had an interest in data related things and sort of like hedged all of my extracurricular or like side of desk tasks towards those kinds of things. So when I was a recruiter, I would often like use our like reporting tools to try to analyze like how I could make my reach outs more effective, sort of like maybe not super scientifically, but like A/B test different templates to see how I could get more people to respond back to me. And in my marketing roles, like I would do like a lot of reporting that I don't think anyone was expecting me to do, but I enjoyed it. And I think it helped us be like more effective in the tasks that we were doing. So I think just like selectively highlighting the things that you did that can be sort of related to the field of data science. And if you haven't already kind of started doing those tasks in your job, I think trying to do more of those things, even if no one's asking you to do them, like finding opportunities to take initiative and do them yourself and create those like job experiences that are applicable that you can put on your resume.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and I think that's a really good idea for people who are working, and then maybe before they start doing like a extra course, or maybe they won't even need to after doing that. So I'm going to mark that as complete. And then pulling up the next question. Oh, and there's a lot of questions about side projects. So this one is, how many projects do you need to have accomplished to qualify for an entry-level data scientist? And also I'll just ask like, or what would be like an interesting project do you think that someone could do to show their abilities to qualify for an entry-level data scientist sort of position? Any thoughts on this?
I guess I'm probably I create a lot of projects using public data. So I would say, you know, I don't know if it's as many, it's just like how many projects, but you're not going to create you're not going to create the Alexa device on your own, right? You know, just as an example, like I would say, there's a lot of public data out there. So in the US, you've got like the US Census. In Canada, there's the similar ones, the Stats Canada, I think. Look off of that data and think about what you would want to learn from, because there's so much unused data out there. And I wouldn't think about the number of projects, but start with a small project and, you know, build that out. Think about how you're going to get data. Think about, you know, the questions you have to ask, you know, create a visual in R, you know, create an analysis, you know, do ANOVA analysis on it. And then start to kind of build that out. You pick another data set to tie into that. Don't use, if you're working at a company, don't use your company's data, because you know you have to be so careful with that. So go for the public data source, because there's always, you know, there's people look at that and maybe they only understand part of it. And so it's also, then you can show how the work you're doing is beneficial to a wider population as well, that it's not just like, you know, here's sales numbers for the specific group that I worked in, but like, how can we look at these demographic numbers? And the demographic numbers are really you know, that can be a fascinating project as well.
And I can post some of the links to some data sources, Helen, that you mentioned, that you sent to one of us in the chat. And
there's Gapminder. I don't know if anyone else likes, I really like Gapminder. And there's, the other ones, there's FRED, which is the Federal Reserve Economic Data of St. Louis. And I can share this in the chat as well.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah, just look online, you know, if you're searching for something, look like free public data set, and then, you know, say like, you know, Canada population growth, for example, and you know, you can kind of click around and find it. It's not too, a lot of those numbers are pretty available.
Thanks. And then Emer, did you have something to say before we wrap up this first Q&A session?
I actually remember asking this exact question when I was starting out. And I think the one tip I'd give people about these sort of projects is, don't just Google data science projects that I should do, or, you know, 10 best data science projects for your CV, because the things that you get back might interest other people and they might not interest you. And really, if you're going to do a data science project, make 100% sure that the data that you're basing it on you really are interested in it. If you're a sports person, then do it on sports analytics. If you're into something else, base it on that data, but don't just do a generic data science project. Do something that you're really curious about, and that's what stands out.
Okay, thanks. I think that's a great tip, especially when if you're working already full-time or going to school and you're doing this side project in your spare time. It's a good tip to do something you'll actually want to do and like look forward to doing. Okay, so thanks again, everyone, for the Q&A, and we're going to let everyone the panelists take a break. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Annie to finish off this last round of the panel discussion.
Thank you. And I mentioned before we're going to come back to mentors, and that's where we're going to start off on the second half. So Jess, you mentioned you had mentors at Shopify. Were there any mentors you had outside of the organization to help you navigate your career?
Ooh, good question. I can't think of like anyone who mentored me beyond kind of like, you know, personal sort of mentors, friends, family, colleagues outside of my team, etc. I did have like really strong mentorship within the team though. I once again will say how incredibly lucky I got that not only were they willing to take on someone with no skills whatsoever, but yeah, we're all very like interested in teaching, like very pedagogical people by nature, and just super generous with their time. And I think like saw the long-term gains that they could get from investing in someone. But yeah, particularly like two mentors on my team, Ross and Steven, they were just so great. They were definitely tough on me a lot of times, which I needed. I think at times when you are in this new environment and you kind of are like the only person on your team who looks like you're just like, I was the only woman. I had like already kind of joined the team coming from a place of not being technical. Like I was intimidated, even though I knew them and knew how awesome they were. They were like, great. I think you just like want to be coddled at times, but they didn't really let that happen. They were like, you're smart, you can do this, we've seen what you can do. I think that was like the benefit of doing a lot of work before even joining the team to sort of prove myself, despite not having exactly the right skill set, just proving that you can have an impact with the skills that you do have in the realm that you're interested in, and like taking a space that was sort of like underutilized on my current team and showing them like, hey, I can do people analytics work. But yeah, they invested so much time in me. We're so patient. Like, I don't know how scarred they are from hearing the words, hey, Ross, hey, Steven, just from across the pod. But yeah, they were very good, but not trying to be like too kind to me, and definitely letting me flounder a lot, and knowing like the limits of when you should be going to try to figure something out yourself. Yeah, I owe like a lot of my journey to them, but also recognize like how lucky I was to end up in a situation where people were investing in me and they were just so brilliant. So yeah, it took a lot of time to learn myself. Did like a lot of like data quest, data camp, like read a lot of books. Data analysis for Python by Wes McKinney is a good one, by the way, if anyone's looking. It's like not too far advanced like some of the other books I picked up, where I was just like, oh, and now I know a loop on page 1. So yeah, I think definitely invest in yourself. But if you don't happen to get lucky with mentors on day 1, like I did, like I myself know that I would be persistent enough to go find one on another team, and like make connections with people. Like I think the way I ended up on people analytics was just through talking to them in maybe more casual settings and showing up on their doorstep and asking questions and being curious and offering my own ideas. So yeah, I think seek one out if it doesn't show up for you. There's always people who are willing to teach, and especially if you're curious and like soaking up everything they're giving you, like people people will take the time. And if you can't find one mentor, steal an hour from this person here, an hour from this other person here, and come with like directed questions that you have so that you're not like expecting them to make you a syllabus or something.
Love it. Are Ross and Stephen on this video call right now?
I don't know. I don't think so. They're busy guys.
That was a really good plug for Shopify, by the way. Emer, did you have a mentor at Unbounce or in any of your previous roles?
In my previous roles, I think I just got really lucky with good colleagues, similar to Jess, where you could just lean your chair back and ask them loads of questions, and they would take 5 minutes every hour or so and come back and talk to you. And that was really the key. It wasn't like this big, huge mentor where you'd block off loads of time. It was like this one person that you could bug very frequently and very nicely to ask them for help about different problems. That was probably more what it was like. In my current role, we do have a lot of data scientists at Unbounce, and we have a pretty strong sort of team when it comes to learning new things. So we have like a professional development day once every 2 weeks. And usually what happens if we want to learn something new in data science, we pick the topic, something like maybe image segmentation, and the four of us come into a meeting and we take different approaches for the same topic, go off and do it, come back and discuss, go off and do some more, come back and discuss. And it's really kind of getting hands-on with the topic and having people to bounce around ideas and bounce around assumptions that you have about it. And that seems to be, for me, that's like the best way I learn. It's like a bit of discussion, a lot of doing, a bit of discussion, a lot of doing, and then you know a lot more at the end of the day. Yeah.
So not one specific mentor, but picking the brains of the people who are the smartest in the room and just kind of cobbling one together yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. How about you, Helen?
So I would say what Jess was saying with you know, with these people that she worked with, that she was able to kind of, it was more of like an informal channel. So I know a lot of there are companies that have like formal mentorship programs, and I think that sometimes I don't know if those are as beneficial as sometimes more of the casual mentorship programs. And it doesn't have to be specifically about data science. It can be, I worked with someone when I did, so I did strategy consulting for a year or so. And he was really amazing at communicating with the business and just really effective with people. And so I learned a lot from him, and still friends with him, still talk to him quite a bit. I think that the other thing that Jess said is if you want help with something or you're looking to get a mentor, don't go and ask them outright. Like, you want to show that you have the initiative, like you've done your research, that you're really motivated to do that, because you don't want to put the whole burden on the mentor to have to give you stuff to do or keep that rolling, because it's a huge, it's a big commitment for, especially informally, right? And so show that you've done most of the work before you go in and, get the mentor, because people respond a lot better to people that have, shown they have the initiative to learn, and people feel you want to feel helpful, but you also don't want to feel like, this idea of like givers and takers, right? And people want to feel like they're a giver, in that you're just asking for a small amount of time, makes a huge difference in the work you do, but you're not going to them and saying, could you show me how to do all of this? It's a relationship that you want to form.
And Nikki, I saw you nodding your head a lot with things that you had to do to be able to find a mentor. So I'm assuming that you did some of these things. Do you have a mentor right now for your career?
Amazon is really good at like bringing basically new hires up to date. So they have like this 3 months training program that they pair you with an experienced person in your team and allow you to understand different aspects of the product and basically kind of hold your hand along the way for these 3 months, and which I thought it was very, very beneficial. But I think Helen banged the nail on the head when she said first do your work and then go to someone to ask your question. I think sometimes even on LinkedIn, people come to me with like very broad questions, like how do I get into data science, or how do I do like something very general. Like I sometimes hesitate to answer because I'm like, did this person really care about, or they just wanted to send a message because it's easy and convenient. So I think it's really important to ask specific questions and show that you went the extra mile, you tried different things. You're saying, oh, I tried A, B, and C, but I don't know how to do this one. Can you help me out? That's I think much more effective than just dropping the big question and general question on someone's head. And I think if you do that, everyone's willing to give you that extra like a nudge to go to the correct direction, rather than just like something general. How do I get into data science? How do I get into UBC? I'm like, if you have a question about a specific requirement, I can help you, but I don't know how you can get into UBC. So I feel like being specific really helps.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And I'm just going to say, Nikki, your mic has some static or some choppiness. So I'm going to move on to some other people for a bit so we can adjust the mic there. And speaking of reaching out to people and getting some help and some insight into things, I have a specific question for Emer. And so you've probably sat on a lot of interviews, I'm guessing, as a senior data scientist at Unbounce.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So if somebody went in and they got an interview and you're sitting on it and they're going for a new data science position without a data science background, so they don't have your traditional pathway to data science or data analytics, is there anything you can think of that they could say or do or emphasize from their experience that would make them really stand out as a great candidate?
You know, it's kind of funny because I don't think there is such a thing as a traditional background for a data scientist, because it's so new that everybody who has came into data science more than likely comes from some other discipline at some point. Maybe it's closely related or maybe not, but they didn't start out with an undergrad in data science, because data science, it's not there. So I really look for, when somebody comes in, it's really all about, one, curiosity for your subject and a passion for your subject, two, a drive to do whatever it takes to get there. And if you can show me that in an interview, that's number one key. You obviously need to have like a level of like intelligence that you can actually do the job, which is obviously very required. But after that, it's all about the drive. And if I was going to give even an interview tip, this is slightly different, but I always find when data scientists come into an interview, they have the models looked up and, you know, the steps that they need to take for the models. But 90% of the time, they haven't looked up the company. They haven't looked up the data that the company has, or the data science approach that the company takes, or the products that it has out there, which I find really kind of unbelievable because it's so important. And what really stands out to me in an interview is somebody comes in and says, you know, you're at Unbounce. I am assuming you have this data and this data. Have you ever thought about doing this? And that's when you know you someone that you really want to keep, because they went out and they said, okay, if I got this job, what would I do with the data I have that would actually bring value to the business? And that's when you go, okay, yeah, okay, you're hired. And it's very different because people think it's, you know, I do precision and I do recall and I follow all these steps and I remove outliers. That's definitely needed. But at the same time, you need to take into account the other side of the business aspect and the sort of value you can actually bring, as opposed to just, I build models.
That is a really good tip for all the people listening out there, to take that next step. And now that's very specific to companies though. So I'm gonna have to go back and go a little broader right now, back to some general skill set questions, just because I know everybody's looking for jobs in different companies and different organizations. And this one is a question for Helen, because Helen, you have a lot of experience meeting different clients from a variety of different fields as principal of your own data design consultancy. So have you noticed any shifts in what they're looking for in somebody to hire somebody for data analytics or data science, whether or not it's specific programs or languages or just general skill sets that they are specifically interested in?
So I would say that a lot of the work. So a lot of companies, their data is not necessarily in one place. So they may have, and this is the, I'm sure everyone can, and just you're nodding your head, is that like in the perfect world, the data would already be there. And that's where I talk about like learning Excel and learning SQL, because you have to get the data first. And so, the thing is like, is that I'm not an expert in these businesses they go into, right? This is like medical device, energy, right? Publishing, right? But I know like what I can bring to the table. And so, you talk about the business proposition. I would say that for communicating with people is that like people can look up the models on their own, right? There's so many resources to look up, right, what this model is, but what your role is clarifying what the model does, right? It's this communication and simplifying what you're doing, being a funnel between the business and the technical aspect, focusing on that. I'm a business person that can bring technical expertise and, my knowledge of data science to the table, but don't lose sight of the business as the end users, because I've seen a lot of people come from this like a DBA backgrounds, and there's so much of, I'm not a DBA, right? And it's not something that I'm interested in doing, but it's obviously a really important part, and security, right? So companies, and sometimes companies have sort of messy situation, and your job is just sort of, and don't feel pressured to know all the answers. Take notes about what's going on, and then say, take it all in, and then say, let me think about this and get back to you. Don't feel like you have to give all the answers at once. And the other thing is that your work is only as good as the way you communicate it. And this is something, the other panelists and I have talked about, as well as this idea of, if you do all the work well and you don't communicate it, then it's, if you only communicate 50% of your work, you're not showcasing all of the work you're doing. So communication is like, these soft skills you have to work on, like, that's nice to maybe update in my spare time, but really it's a really key part of working with clients. And whether you're working with external clients or internal clients, thinking about what you're communicating to them, and being really clear, and almost sort of over communicating to an extent, because I don't think you see people get as upset about people sending them over communicating things as the holes in information that sometimes get dropped. So, kind of own the communication channels.
Absolutely. And I was looking over the break on some of the questions that have been coming in, and there was an interesting one for Jess about, well, how you found time. And I'm curious about this too. How did you find time to learn all the stuff on the side of your desk? And is there anything you're looking at learning right now for your position?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a game of ruthless prioritization, and what I was prioritizing learning at different points in time really depended on like the stage of maturity that the team was at, what kind of focus we had on like specific projects, or where the company was, and like what was important to them. And so like, to use an example, like when I first joined the team, I really threw myself more so into learning SQL initially, for one thing, because I think the gains were faster because I had that frame of reference of understanding Excel and like other like less technical kind of BI tools. And then at the same time, the team was still very new. It was like in its infancy. We hadn't developed really many dashboards for simple reporting, like headcount and attrition and stuff that we have now that people can like self-service, but at the time didn't exist. So we were building up this foundation of self-serve dashboards. So I was like, okay, what I can get really good at initially is SQL and dashboarding, and like data visualizations. And on the side, like in my own time, I was starting to build up my Python skills, and had the benefit of the team assigning me kind of like good first issues in our GitHub repo, and I was doing like my my courses on the side. But yeah, trying not to burn yourself out at the same time. I think like you need to have balance. It was always still fun for me. I was always still like really just invigorated by learning more. And the team was just like in a really fun place of growth and like always kind of developing these new things and building our stack up. So but yeah, definitely you need to take time to be a human. Like you're not just like a data science learning robot. So balance, but yeah, ruthlessly prioritize for what's relevant to you and interesting, and what you think would have you make the biggest impact with the skill set that you currently have and what you have the bandwidth to learn at the moment. But yeah, I won't lie and say it wasn't a struggle to kind of have to do like double the work of everyone on my team. Okay, like I need to learn this and then I need to do it. I need to learn this and then I need to do it. And one thing I will caution against is like falling into the trap of not trying to learn something as deeply just to like get to the end goal of like accomplishing the thing you want to accomplish. Like I think there were a few times where luckily I had people around me just saying like, hey, slow down, and like, why don't you take another hour and like go learn this to the point where you can like explain it back to me. Like I know you got to the answer, but like do you understand the math behind this? Do you understand why that piece of code ended up working when I helped you like add that period or something? So like, do you understand this library? You only use this one piece of it, like other pieces might be relevant. So I think yeah, there's always like this rush to the end goal, but enjoy the process of learning. And if you really kind of try to soak it in and take that extra little bit of time to like really understand the thing, it will benefit you later.
And that's a really good point. So in the process of constantly learning and making sure that you really understand something, right now in Vancouver at least, there's only one Master of Data Science program, but there are a ton of boot camps and certificates and things like that coming out. So a question for everyone on the panel is, how do you feel about these certificates, these boot camps versus master's programs versus any other learning resource? When you see a candidate come in with, say, a boot camp certification, does that the same to you, or is that better than, say, a master's program or something like that? And let's start with Nikki.
Can you hear me okay now?
A little bit quiet, but speak up and you're good.
Okay, for sure. So for me, it was just like, I think using every resource is important. Like even these online boot camps taught me a lot. Specifically for me, was very helpful for the domains that I didn't have any knowledge in before. And I just want to figure out for example, what is Python? I didn't know in the beginning, believe it or not, what is Python. So I feel like these online resources are really helpful. YouTube, amazing. I think the data and the information that is there is really classified, and some channels were able to like kind of put that in an organized manner, so kind of like users could go from A to Z in a topic, but of course they would not go in a depth. I said that before in our previous meeting. I think until you don't do a project A to Z yourself, you wouldn't be able to get a hang of it. So I feel like online resources are really good to introduce you to a field, to a domain, but going deep into a subject, it's on your own. I feel like you have to do your research. You have to kind of build a project around that area of a topic that you like, so you get to understand the in and out of it. So I think all resources are useful. Don't hesitate to use any of them. I think these online programs like Coursera are very helpful. They have like projects for you, even if you don't know how to start a project. My first project was into one of these online courses because I didn't know how to make a project, even if I had the data that I'm interested in, and what should I do with it. So I feel like they're a great like a blueprint for you to understand what you should do, and then you can go on your own and explore it more. So I think every resources can be beneficial.
Very nice. And Emir, how do you feel about all of these certificates and boot camps?
I would actually agree in that they're incredibly useful. I would usually caution people to make sure that whatever course they pick definitely explains the mathematical background, as opposed to just implement these lines of code and click go, because obviously then you don't really understand what's going on. I personally have used Coursera quite a lot and I find it really good, but exactly what Nikki said, I think it's a really good introduction, and then you have to finish it off with either a capstone in the course itself or a personal project that you do on top of it. Because if you don't finish it off with that, I feel like the information, you just forget it because you haven't really applied it yourself and went off and thought about it critically for a while. So it is a balance that they are really useful and I find them really good, but it's not 100% that you do the course and suddenly you know everything. You really have to go away and think about it and do your separate project as well.
Thank you. And Helen, I know that you are already teaching some courses, and you probably have some connections with other LinkedIn authors or other instructors out there. So what course are you taking right now or about to take to make sure that your skills are always up to date in this field?
So I started taking LinkedIn courses before I became an instructor. And for those of you who are looking to, to access the library, it's a really good deal. It's, and especially if you use a lot, and a lot of the clients are corporate clients. So see if, your organization has access to the library, like if you have a corporate subscription, because you can access as many courses as you want, and you can ask questions, follow the authors of the courses. I'm actually taking a course. So I was working with a client who's in architecture, and there's a BIM system that integrates with Power BI. So that's something that is new to me. The other thing is there's this. This is actually kind of, and you can find this pretty readily online. Is there's this idea of this learning pyramid, and at the top you've got like lectures, sort of the more passive learning. And then at the bottom, you've got this deep learning, right? So once you've done this project, discussing it with other people, really like, how would you explain what you did to something and to someone? And I think the key that I take away from that is that you have to start at the narrower part, right? You have to have a basic idea of like what's going on. Learn that, kind of take the information in initially and learn like an overview of the subject, and then get into doing your own projects, get into talking about them with other people. And, even if it doesn't get implemented, right, you share what you're doing with other people, get their thoughts on it, and have those discussions. So you can not only like learn more, but you can also, it's good practice for explaining what you're doing to other people, to your colleagues, to your clients. And the other thing is don't skip steps either. So Jess mentioned SQL. SQL's actually, if you go into like, so pandas and Python, you have to know SQL in order to know how to use pandas effectively, because of the way that a lot of the functionality is written. So, and you can't learn machine learning without knowing enough, Python to get, to take that next step, because so I did a machine learning course because I started last year. And so I do work for Cornell University's online program as well. And there was actually like a pre-test to take it. You had to have make sure that you, ironically, I took all this stuff. I was an undergrad quite a while ago. And for some reason, I did happen to take linear algebra and multivariable calculus. And I did probability when I was in actuary. And somehow these are all helpful skills in machine learning. But you can't jump right into that, because that was something I think just look at what skill you want to learn first. So learn SQL, become really comfortable with Excel, and then you can go into learning Python and going from there. And it's not about the technology as much, but just thinking about what you need to learn to get there. Be patient, as Jess said.
Yeah, I love that you guys are emphasizing build your foundation first before going on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So with that, I'm going to ask the last question to each panelist, which is, if you traveled back in time and you are now interviewing the very first time for your very first data analytics or data science position, and you only had 10 seconds to tell your past self something that would help you advance in your career, what would you say? Jess, you're first up.
Oh boy, that's a tough one, especially the 10 seconds thing. I tend to be verbose. I think I would say, like, you're the only one holding you back. I think, like, if I look back on my journey, like, a lot of the time, like, I just wasn't seeing myself as capable or technical enough or some other thing. But yeah, like, don't stand in your own way. You are like a resourceful, smart person, and you can like figure out any problem. All of these technical skills are just another tool in your tool belt to solve a problem, the same way Excel is, or a Google Doc, or a conversation with someone, or a presentation. You know, like, they're all just different means to an end. And so stop seeing them as like this like intimidating thing that like only hacker bros can do, you know?
Wonderful. Perfect. And Nikki, how about you? What would you say?
So for this job that I got, this was the first interview I got, and that was just, I got the job and I didn't do any other interviews. So I would say it went well. But if I were to give myself an advice, it's okay. You're just off of the grad school. They don't expect you to know rocket science. So as long as you show, like, I would show myself to be curious, be able to learn, be able to kind of have backbone, and be able to kind of like fit in the industry. I think that's enough. And just having those extra projects that I have on my resumes are good enough to show that I'm capable of doing these jobs. I think I really underestimated myself before doing an interview. So I would say just be more confident and don't underestimate yourself.
Thank you. And Helen, would you say something similar or something different? 10 seconds, what would you say?
I would say don't wait for someone to teach you something. Teach yourself, and also perseverance pays off. Don't give up. If it's tough, you know, stick with it. You know, you'll get it. You'll get there.
Thank you. And finally, Emir.
I would probably say that starting out, you always underestimate what you can do and overestimate what everybody else knows. When you go to an interview, you assume that they are rocket scientists at the other side of the desk, which is one wrong assumption. So that's probably what I'd tell them. I'd also say to just have patience. I think people are, when you switch career, you're very hard on yourself to get there faster and quicker and smarter. And it's different to college, because college, you have 6-month terms in university and you finish something, whereas a career is decades. It's a different sort of cadence. So just have patience with yourself and learn what you want to learn and really enjoy it, and then you'll get there.
I love that answer. And with that, thank you so much to our panelists. You guys have been amazing and awesome with your answers. And now I'll pass it back to Natasha.
Okay, thanks, Annie. We were talking about putting you on the spot and asking you the same 10-second question, since it's only fair if you could go back in time and tell yourself before your first data science interview or data analytics interview, what would you tell yourself?
You know what? I thought of the questions, but I never thought about my own answers. For my first analytics position, I had a funny question. My boss actually asked me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And so I think I would just go back and say, you know what, there's no wrong answer. Just do you. You'll be fine.
Okay, I think that's great advice. Yeah, so with that, just thanks again to the panelists and our moderator. And we're going to get into our second Q&A session with some questions from the audience. So again, you can keep submitting the questions on Mentimeter, or if you don't have any questions, you can upvote other people's questions. And then I'm just going to start again with the highest upvoted question because it has 8 upvotes. People asking, how can I make myself stand out in comparison to someone with a computer science degree, or maybe also like statistics degree, or something that you would usually feel has a stronger, would be a stronger contender for a data scientist position?
Because I gave
Yeah.
a bit of a lame answer for the last one, I'll start this one off.
Yeah,
So like my background's in marketing, and when going into interviews where the other people you're up against have these really strong computer science or STEM backgrounds, one thing that I found helped me stand out was I understood what the company actually needed and wanted. And so that's not necessarily the highest grade in a course. It's not necessarily a really concrete understanding of, I don't know, linear algebra, whatever thing in it. But what mattered was to be able to say, hey, I did this, and this is why it's important to your company, because it can help you do that, which is going to save this amount of money or this amount of time. And I understand your product, and this is how I can deliver.
Yeah,
thanks.
I totally agree with Annie. Like, I think asking questions that people actually want to hear the answer to. I think there are so many fun and interesting questions when you're doing any kind of analysis, or even like deciding what to present in a dashboard or report or something of that sort. But if it's not something that is going to be important to the end user or really like draw their attention or sort of instigate them to act on the thing, then you're not asking the right question. And I think a lot of the time as a data scientist, we can become like ticket takers, people who are asking us for specific things. And I think like one thing that is important to learn is to push back, to ask questions about their questions. You know, why do you need this specific thing? Would this work instead? Are you trying to answer this question in this way? Maybe like you actually want to understand this thing instead. So I think like being more of a partner than a ticket taker and showing that in an interview. So just like really trying to understand if it is kind of like if they're asking you like a situational question, like showing that you're really trying to pick apart the problem and understand like why it's valuable to them, and if you could approach it in like a different way, or like a more like innovative way.
Right. Okay, thanks. And does anyone else want to add to this question before I move on? Okay.
So one other thing that I would say with like going in for the interviews is that it's also an opportunity to interview the company too. And if they're not interested in discussing like what their business does, or they look at you like you're just, you know, you're like a robot, you know, that's also, it's a way for you to learn more about what the organization does and whether or not you want to work there, right? Because, you know, as Amir said, like, you know, these people come in with these models, right? You can look up models, you can look up the reference for that, but what's, you know, what's the context of what they're trying to analyze? And, you know, does the company value you as an individual? Do they value your contributions? And, you know, what you can bring to the table? It's an opportunity to reverse interview as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. And that kind of brings me, it kind of perfectly lines up with the next question, just about, yeah, how you're not just trying to get a job, you're also trying to get a job at a company where you can actually maybe do data scientists. So again, there's so many buzzwords being thrown around when people talk about data science. So kind of building on that, how do you find a company that is where you would actually like genuinely be using your data science skills, and instead of just being labeled a data scientist, but not working on the kind of things you're really interested in?
That's actually a really good question. And I wish I knew that before I went interviewing at the start of my career, because there's one question I think every data scientist should ask a company when they go in, and that is, where are you, as in the company, in their data journey? Like, where are they? Do they have a pipeline? Do they have a dashboard? Do they have data sets at all? because a lot of companies now, because of this data science buzz going around, they hire data scientists. They might have a CSV spreadsheet of data and that is it. And you will have to go build every single pipeline that you need and every dashboard and choose all the infrastructure, which is like, it's definitely part of data science work, but that could take you 2 years to do. So that's the one question I would really ask, and make sure that you know where they are on their data journey and know what you're getting yourself in for when you go to that interview.
Yeah, I would say don't make sure they're not asking you to set up the database as well. And Livy, if you're interested in that, but yeah, know where they get their data. That's exactly what I was going to say. And make sure there's someone else on the team that knows something about it. Otherwise, you're going to be the help desk. Yeah, that's a great point. That's exactly. I'm sure that many of you are also thinking that as well.
Oh, and
I want to just add something. Do your research beforehand. If you're joining a big company or if you're joining a startup, there are different expectations with that. Like if you're joining a startup, no, you're gonna do much more different areas in your work rather than a big company because it's all settled and everyone's doing the specific work. So I would say definitely do your research beforehand. And I actually did one thing before joining this job that I think it was very valuable, and that was reaching out to a previous language, like not a previous, like a current language engineering at Amazon, and asking what do they do? What's a day in a job of a language engineer in Amazon? What things you do? And they just, that was like, I think a great perspective for me.
Right. And then, yeah, I guess then if they're actually doing data science or what you're interested, probably you would be too if you're hired. So thank you, everyone. And thank you to whoever submitted this question. There was just one more question that I saw that I wanted to ask in the last few minutes. Kind of answered that. I guess we also, and this is open to everyone. Katie, if you're here, did you want to ask your question?
I think my question was already
kind of answered. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh yeah, this one. Sorry. Yeah, and we again, Helen, you're asked what course you're going to do to stay up to date. But yeah, and there were some books mentioned, but are there any places you go to stay updated, everyone, on the latest data science topics? And also any book recommendations? I guess book isn't exactly up to date, but.
So I would say with her resources, look at what tech companies are investing in. And, so I'm lucky because I can see how so LinkedIn's a Microsoft company. And so, they have a resource like, okay, these are courses and areas where there's a lot of use, a lot of development, but look at where tech companies are investing money. If the CEO of Microsoft is talking about, the machine learning in Azure and Power BI on presentations, that means it's something that's more at the top of their list. And look at the AWS has a lot of training and conferences. Follow those people on LinkedIn, like follow the product managers and the program managers, and see what they're posting and sharing. So follow those updates because they come out a lot. And don't feel like you have to keep up with everything all the time, right? Just, do read it, see some of the information come in, but then you may not necessarily use it later, right? So sometimes the best way to look something up is when you have a problem you're trying to solve. So then as far as books, I would say, so, I mentioned like the LinkedIn learning courses are in a library with Health. I have a friend that does our weekly courses. And, this includes all sorts of modeling and all these different, functionalities and projects in R. So, and then I know someone else that does the Excel Weekly, Oz on LinkedIn, and he's really good. And then there's a book that it was about search engine algorithms. So, we talk about with like machine learning, and Nikki, this is definitely more in your area of work than mine, but talking about these search algorithms, because that was so there were stages of machine learning. Oh, and also Michael Jordan, who's a UC Berkeley professor, has some really good talks.
Okay, thanks. Annie? Yeah.
Oh, I'd like to add on to that. So later on, there's going to be a networking portion of this. And I find that having your own little friend group with similar interests, it means that you don't have to be the only person looking up all of these things. Everybody will be looking through their own thing. Not one person needs to be on there 24/7. And then you can share that information like, oh, okay, I know that Helen's interested in this. So every time I see it, I'm just going to send it to her so she doesn't have to keep looking it up. So creating that little network is very handy.
Yeah. And the givers
for the plug. Sorry, Helen, I cut you off. Did you have something to add?
No, that's also a good point with like the givers and takers and the mentors, right? If you reach out to someone, I thought bringing them something, saying, I thought this was interesting. I'd love to hear what you think on this, or, I watched this, or I read your post, starting a conversation that way. And reaching out to people, I think, trying to, connect with people on LinkedIn and ask them, do you want to do a virtual coffee or a virtual drink? Just kind of breaking the ice that way, because people are great resources too, right? People create this content, and there's a lot of tech content out there. So, having those relationships with people is really helpful to get, to seeing these updates.
Thanks.
I would probably add one more thing to that. Just in terms of keeping up with content, most big companies now have some type of machine learning blog online. Like Google has one, DeepMind has one, most companies run one, and they're a lot more accessible than their equivalent research papers that they're based on. So if you want to just keep up with something really quickly, follow all of them. The Batch is also a good one by Andrew Ning. He puts out one every week about the different machine learning topics that are going on. And they're just really quick and easy ways to scan through it. And if you find something you're interested in, then you can dive in depth into it as well.
Yeah. Thanks. And I think we're all the volunteers and stuff for keeping track of these notes and resources. So we'll be also posting them after the event. And so I'm just going to, again, wrap up this Q&A session with one last question. It's about, and it's kind of like to do with what you mentioned, so if someone does and this is also based on a question that was in the chat, if someone reaches out to you on LinkedIn about, say, a coffee chat or some content you posted, like, how would you prefer that they reach out to you to make like the most of your time and the most of their time? Like, for example, would you, like you mentioned, appreciate if they are following up about a post you made, or asking a question about it, or just asking, because maybe just asking, do you have any tips? Like someone's mentioned, isn't the best strategy always to start these conversations. So for the last question, if you have any final thoughts about this.
Yeah, I guess I can quickly answer. I feel like I've generally been most receptive to people who have like done their due diligence and are asking a specific question that kind of shows that you aren't just like, they didn't just type data scientist into LinkedIn and like we're like, let me just like message all of these people the same like generic thing and see who gets back. Like it seems like they genuinely like sought out me, or like, like a specific person to ask a specific question. I think, yeah, don't seem like you are like spamming someone. And if you are reaching out to someone for a particular reason or because you like and respect them, like mention that, and mention what you'd like to like learn from them and what you'd like the conversation to be about. I think in our generation, people don't like talking on the phone or doing any more video calls than are necessary. So I think like giving them a realistic preview of like what you want to talk about always helps. But yeah, that's just me.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would say look at someone's profile beforehand, right? And, think about what you know. And yeah, just, and don't go, I think the other thing is that like when I was just starting out like in my career, because the actuarial science world is not a huge world. And there was like a directory, and this was like, I guess I just didn't think to like look through LinkedIn. But there was a directory of people, and I would like reach out to them. And I don't think you can go in with the expectation of like, oh, I'll talk to them and they'll have, a job, or they'll be willing to like interview. But there are that often, that sometimes can be an outcome. I think just go in with, don't go in as sort of a taker, like you're only asking someone because you want to benefit from it. It's a mutual relationship as well, because, a mentor, someone you reach out to, right, they want to learn more about you as well. And they want to learn, what you're asking, and like what fresh perspective, other people bring. And so going, just starting it as a relationship where you don't have any expectations, and you want to learn, and you're an active learner. I think that's really important, rather than just like, oh, they just, sent me something on this. I mean, one example of it is like, I get people that I don't really know, like, oh, I'm a tax strategist, how could, let me know, like, here's how I can help. The other thing is, don't send people a Calendly invite on the first time you reach out to them. Like, it just sort of, because, I think that, yeah, scheduling can be difficult, but you want to set up a relationship with someone as to why you're reaching out to them, and why they should, give half an hour of their time for your calendar, rather than like, oh, I'm just going to fill this up with appointments. Build that relationship first, and then, I don't have a Calendly, right? I don't have that many meetings. But yeah, just think about how you would start a friendship, right? You wouldn't say, like, I'm going to befriend you and then we're going to like go on a trip together. Think about, how you would, just ask someone, like, let's get coffee or something, and ask them what they do, and share, and also sometimes share experiences, right? You may be from the same area that they are. What are you grew up in, shared experiences. That's often a good, strong way to start too.
Thanks. And yeah, that's always interest, or changing people's perspective, instead of like, I'm just going to message the first data scientist and talk about data scientists. It's important to remember there's more to building the relationship there. I think that's.
Oh, the other thing I was going to say is, for people that post, like, I'll see posts like on the courses, or on, people's comments on the posts that I do. And that's also, if you're not sure like how to introduce yourself, just share your thoughts on something that they shared, and, kind of, maybe later you want to reach out and say like, I'd love to connect. I'm really interested in what you're sharing.
Right.
And I've done that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for the tips, and that's our last question for today's event. So again, I wanted to thank all of our amazing panelists and moderator for helping everything go so smoothly. I think I know from our Slack channel, everyone felt like we learned a lot and were inspired.